to It's the Three Whiskey Grumpy Hour. No, wait a minute, that's not it. Let's start again.
Hey, that's not bad.
It's the Three Grumpy Whiskey Hour. Oh, wait, hold on. That's not right either. Let me get an extra Snickers bar, listeners, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, I've had my fill of Snickers. It's the Three Whiskey Happy Hour. Recording on a Saturday morning because that's the only time we could find. So we're not live like we would like to be. But here we are. I'm having coffee instead of whiskey. Are you guys having coffee, tea, anything fun? Irish whiskey?
No.
Lucretia,
I in my
had coffee.
1812 mug.
Your 1812 mug, right? Okay.
What
the
what
Battle
happened in
of,
1812?
Pardon?
What happened in 1812 that's on your mug?
There was this little war, John. I think
Actually,
you've
I
heard of it.
believe
Madison's
I
Folly. It was called Madison's Folly. Remember
as
Right.
they
back
say.
then.
But I actually think that it's the Francis Scott Key over Fort what's its name? What fort was it?
McHenry, wasn't it?
Was it
No.
Fort McHenry? Anyway,
Yes,
that's
in
what I think it
Baltimore.
is.
Yeah.
Right.
I have to say I'm embarrassed to say I'm drinking out of my Sheets mug, which
What does
is
that mean?
for those of you who, like you two, who know nothing of the East Coast. Sheets and Wawa are in a contest for
yeah.
world domination. So Sheets is from Pittsburgh and Ohio area, and Wawa is Philadelphia. So every now and then the Amish country is right in the middle. So when you go to the Amish country, you have Sheets and Wawa next to each other. So I have mugs from both.
Aha. Well, all right. I'm drinking out of an Age of Reagan coffee mug from the Reagan Library. It's not named for my.
You win.
I know I win. Well, it's not named for my book exactly, although they decided to use that title for the conference, the academic conference they do every other year. So they always have to invite me since they're using the title. Okay. But while we're talking about food and comestibles, two things. One is I think I sent you guys that poll from Pew about what people think is immoral. And I was pleased to I think it's a stupid poll, but never mind why. But I was pleased to see that only 4% of Americans think eating meat is immoral. And yet, why does it seem that 50% of America has gone vegan? Because they yell from the corners or something, right? Anyway.
I just think they're louder, Steve. I don't think 50. And now
No.
they have their soy boy champion in Texas.
Oh, I'll come back to him very briefly in a moment. I do have an interesting piece of McDonald's trivia for you, John, and it has to do with the legendary fact-checking of the New Yorker magazine. If you know in journalism, the New Yorker is legendary, or used to be, for their fact-checking, and they would find any little mistake in the process. And so I was reading this in John McPhee's memoir of all the writing he did for the New Yorker, and he said one time he had an article that went in and said there are two Illinois rivers, one in Illinois and the other one in Arkansas and Colorado. And of course, the fact-checking department comes back and says, actually, there's like 5 of them. There's one in Oregon. There's one in a couple other places. And so they're like that. That nothing gets by their fact-checking. Well, guess what? They published a short story in 2005 where the characters said they bought chicken McNuggets at McDonald's on a visit in 1979. And
They didn't exist back then.
Exactly. Well, the readers pounced. It turned out that they weren't introduced till 1983.
Everybody knows that.
Well,
Come on.
everybody but the New Yorker fact-checking department, which I thought was kind of funny. And as you can imagine, New Yorker readers love to pounce on any factual mistake they might make in there.
I remember as a kid when they came out, and I, of course, rushed to get them. And
Right.
we were all, me and my friends were trying to figure out, like, what is this made of? Like, where did it come from?
Right.
How did they make this? Like, where did the bones go?
Right.
Questions that still remain unanswered.
Right. Well, Jay Leno used to have a great routine about the chicken McNugget back in the 80s. It's all, pressed and formed chicken. And he says, you could put a bunch of these in front of a chicken and they'd look down and say, I see nothing here that offends me, because they're fake, right? Or you could dig it up in 500 years and say, oh, look, a chicken McNugget, and probably still be edible, right?
Well, the other statistic I saw that bears on your 4% is I saw a report that steakhouses are killing it.
Yeah.
Absolutely killing it. Like, that's the most popular segment in the restaurant business right now.
Even with the high price of beef.
It's because of the
Yes.
high price of beef, because people don't want to spend, $19 a pound on a nice ribeye and then take it home and ruin it.
Oh, okay.
That's the reason.
That's a good theory. I like that one.
No,
But
it's not-
meanwhile,
I'm sorry. I'm told it's not a theory. I'm told that's the reason.
could be. Yeah, it makes sense. Meanwhile, we have casus belli to raise the Jolly Roger. So I've recently been listening now and then to a brand new podcast. It's just been going 3-4 months. That's a little bit like ours because it's two dudes and a chick. You know, how many podcasts are, two dudes and a chick like ours? And it's called Central
Probably
Air.
thousands.
No, I don't know. But it's about politics, although they're not political philosophers. They're economists mostly. It's called Central Air because they think they're centrist, but I'm sure Lucretia would say they're all radical, progressive, soft-headedness, although they do oppose Tallarico in Texas and thought he's a terrible nominee, not because they favored what's-her-name, but because they think they were both hopeless. And anyway, it's Josh Barro, whose father is Robert Barro, the Harvard economist, John, who you may know of, who's actually pretty good.
Yes.
And then Megan McArdle at the Washington Post, who writes us really good economic articles. And then the third person is what I would actually kind of like. It's Ben Dreyfuss, who actually is pretty far out there. He used to work at Mother Jones, and his father is the actor Richard Dreyfuss. And he's actually pretty funny. But his Substack is called, let's tell you the sense of these guys and why you can actually listen to them. His Substack is called Calm Down. Well, calm down about what? Calm down about Trump. He says, he's anti-Trump derangement syndrome, even though he doesn't like Trump, which kind of marks him out as unusual because you're supposed to be all in on hating Trump. And so he says, I don't care about the ballroom. I don't care about the Kennedy Center. People are sort of dumb. People are dumb to get worked up about all these things. But here's the problem. The other day I'm listening, and they went off for 20 minutes about McDonald's and the new Big Arch Burger. And I thought, they can't do that. That's our territory.
Yeah.
Anyway, but Megan McArdle made a really interesting point. This was, if you remember the controversy, the head of McDonald's, Krasinski, whatever his name is, took this dainty little bite out of the burger and got ruthlessly mocked on social media. And the other burger companies actually did their own videos mocking him. And Megan makes a simple point. What did that just do? It made much bigger news that McDonald's has a new burger. And then they went and talked about the burger some and with mixed reviews. You've had one, right, John, I think?
Yes, I didn't think it was so bad. But look, this just tells us more about the Nepo baby power structure. Right? You just explained these people are hosts who are distinguished solely by having the blood of more famous parents. And so they were coddled in life. They weren't raised on McDonald's. They've probably only been at McDonald's maybe 5 times their whole lives. I don't trust their taste, right? They're one of those 4% who probably think eating meat is immoral. And I bet all of those people on that podcast have gone through various phases of not eating this, not eating that, denying the omnivorous nature of mankind, right? You guys should like that. It's human nature to be omnivorous.
Well, you know what, John? They wouldn't have disappointed you if you listened through because they talked about other chains like Five Guys and In-N-Out. But then they did live up to your stereotype, which is they said, but burgers really aren't very good for you, and you shouldn't have them very often. Oh, exactly. I said, no, that's where they lost it, right?
Hamburgers aren't good for you. Come on.
Should be a rare treat. I thought, no, you're all wrong. And anyway.
Instead of their lightly grilled cucumber sandwiches they probably have at high tea.
Made with massive amounts
I would arm
of
wrestle
soy,
either of
which is why
them
they're
after they had one of
feminine.
their wilted asparagus burgers.
All right.
The nerve. Sorry, Lynn, but Lucretia was going to comment, and she's she's in a hamburger testosterone-filled household over there with all the
I am.
Mr.
Yes, I
Lucretia and Lucretia Jr. I mean, although that sounds like a great idea for a burger, Lucretia Jr.
The Lucretia Jr.
The Lucretia Jr.
Yeah, so nobody in my house eats it, except for me on occasion, eats anything but meat. So as a matter of health, it's I can't even imagine that people think that somehow taking a bunch of products and processing them to the hilt and making soy the central thing and then actually eating that is just amazing to me. The only thing I'll touch with soy in it is soy sauce because it's fermented. So,
right.
Can I tell a story about how I took the Lucretia family to dinner in San Francisco once at the Tadich Grill, which is kind of like a steakhouse, a great place. And I have to say, there were some large pieces of meat produced, brought to the middle of the table. And those like African safari shows where like the cow goes down and then the hyena pack
Yeah.
comes in, and then you just see the movement of the animals and pieces fly out, but you don't see any more of the
Oh,
wildebeest.
John, I'm embarrassed that you would say that because I do. At least you, Lucretia Jr., learned better manners than that. So
Tadish's, I haven't been there in a long time. They still serve the lamb shoulder. Isn't that one of their specialties?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, the thing I love, they actually serve corned beef hash for dinner with poached
Wow.
eggs.
That is
it's
pretty good.
poached
That's what
eggs.
I had.
All
Yeah,
right.
that was
All right.
awesome.
Let's take a quick break from one of our sponsors, and then we'll come back and get into some serious topics. All right. So coming back in 3, 2. All right, John, you're up first today in our free for all round robin format. And I think you want to talk about Iran. I'll just say quickly to
Yes.
set you up that I finally figured out this week how you can tell that we're winning. You know, fog of war, we don't know the details, but the light bulb went on. I said, oh, I know why we're winning this war, and we're winning it big. Because the media is telling us it's a quagmire. And I mean, you go back to what they did in Vietnam, reported everything completely backwards, like the Tet Offensive and so forth. And I just thought, oh, I don't need to try and chase after details. If the media says it's a quagmire, it means we're winning. So over to you.
Mm. Well, I thought I would kick off this topic with the resignation of Joe Kent, who was, I guess, the deputy to Tulsi Gabbard, who's the National Intelligence Director, and is thought to be, along with J.D. Vance, sort of center of the non-interventionist wing, if you want to call it that, in the administration. And one, he made 2 points, both of which I think are wrong, but also the wrong standard. He said first that Iran raised no imminent threat to the United States, and so he had to resign. And then he said that the United States have been, I don't know, enticed into war. Would that be the right word? By Israel and its American lobbyists. So I think raising this, I don't know, anti-Semitic, raising the anti-Semitic flag, and I think making his true nature clear. I would actually not have questioned his motives if he had just left it at, I don't think Iran's an imminent threat, and I'm happy to have a debate about it. But then to say, and it's the Jews, it's
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like, what is with these people? I mean, every time they say something, they just attach, and it's the Jews right afterwards to every problem in the United States. But it did raise questions. Two, worth talking about. I think one is how's the war going, and then two, what does this mean for the Trump administration and the MAGA movement? Now, I think, as exactly as you said, Steve, the more the media makes it seem like the war is lost, right? If you read the headlines of the New York Times, you think the war has been lost. Even the Wall Street Journal news page has a story today saying Iran may be winning and they might be, rope-a-doping us, and then at the end of the war, they'll control the Strait of Hormuz. We can have an argument about whether the strategic choice to attack Iran is the proper one. I tend to think it is. But at the level of operations and tactics, we are kicking the hell out of Iran. I mean, how much better could it go? We have totally wiped out their top leadership. The president hasn't been, the president of Iran hasn't been seen. Not the president, although he hasn't been seen either, I think. But the head, the Ayatollah,
The
who,
son.
actually runs Iran, has not been seen in public. There was a very, I don't know, kind of to me comic example where the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is their real religious military and really runs the country, came out with a press release saying, the United States isn't winning, Israel's not winning, we're still building lots of missiles. And then there was a press release just later that day saying, the spokesman has been killed by a strike. So it gives you examples. But the Iranian Navy's at the bottom of the ocean. The Iranian Air Force is nowhere to be seen. The missile attacks and drone attacks are way, way down to 90% down. And then just the Strait of Hormuz, it just strikes me as the hardest problem because two guys with a drone can start shooting at tankers in that very 20-mile isthmus. But that's a good problem to have. If that's the challenge facing us now, I think that means we've pretty much won the war from a military sense. It's now a political issue. And then the last point, I think this idea that the Jews drove us into it is just crazy. I mean, I think that's just crazy. I really worry about the right wing of the Republican Party that it accommodates people who blame the Jews for everything. So I'm
So
done.
I'd like to go back to your Joe Kent to start there. My understanding, I would never listen to it, but I read it, is that in the midst of his latest podcast with Tucker Carlson, interview with Tucker Carlson, about 30 minutes in, he talks about the fact that the reason he knows that there is no threat from Iran is because one of those ayatollahs, I can't keep them straight. Why can't they have different names? But anyway, one of them 5-6 years ago, in the midst, maybe even longer, sorry, maybe closer to 8, in the midst of all the nonsense with Obama sending pallets and negotiating the deal with Iran, Khomeini sent a communication to the I think it was the UN. I'm not going to remember the details. You can look it up. But in which he said that the Iranians believed that nuclear weapons and chemical weapons were what's it called? Haram. Haram?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Haram. Evil, bad, just like
forbidden,
homosexuals. And so all those things and dogs, right? Nuclear weapons are that. As if that was a fatwa. And so he claims there's a fatwa against nuclear weapon. And B, how stupid do you have to be to think that because Khomeini says something, it means anything? You know, in the Quran, what is it called? Taqiyya, something like that. I can't keep it straight. It is a tenet of Islam that you can lie and dissemble and be disingenuous and do whatever you have to do for the good of the whole. So that is his argument. My understanding, he was left out of any kind of briefings on Iran for the last several months. I don't know if that's a misinformation campaign or what, but supposedly for the last several months, he hasn't heard any of the briefings, and so doesn't know what the actual strategic and tactical reasons were and so on. But that's his argument. So let's start there. I want to mention yesterday in my class, I asked students about, was it true that most young people believe that we're fighting this war because of Israel? That, we were too afraid not to join it. Trump was too afraid not to join it. That Israel has an outsized impact, outsized leverage on our foreign policy decisions. And one of my students, he's a very smart student, looks at me and says, does anybody understand who Trump really is? Can you imagine him actually being cowed by Netanyahu into doing something, which came from a young person, okay, which I thought was a really, really smart. So I wonder, I just want to mention one more thing, John, the CNN, or I don't know, CNN announced it. That guy, Harry, whatever his name
Harry
is.
Anton, the pollster. Harry Anton.
That's him, was talking about the fact that MAGA is basically 100% behind Trump on this war. So what we ended up discussing in my class, for what it's worth, was this is all that winning the war is going to require the political will to do so. And that's going to require the political messaging that keeps a majority of the public behind the war. Does that make sense? That's going to be not our military capabilities, weapons capabilities, but actually whether or not Trump can and his people can convince the Americans across the board that we needed to do this. And of course, things like Joe Kent and Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, all of those things make it more difficult. Never mind, the Democrats, they're not even worth thinking about. But to see this split is very upsetting, but I don't think the split is as big as they're claiming.
I think that's right. I meant to send this to you guys, and I just ran out of time. The most startling thing, I expect Tucker and Candace Owens to go berserk, and the American Conservative magazine, which is fully isolationist and hates Israel. What startled me the most 2 or 3 days ago was Christopher Caldwell in The Spectator coming out with a very harsh article, just out of nowhere, it seemed to me, saying this is the end of Trump, a total betrayal of everything he stands for and ought to be doing. And it was startling. There was no equivocation about it. He just, and look, Chris is a smart guy. I've had my disagreements with him. I've also thought his reporting on Europe is the best for an American. And that just staggered me to see that. And
that's, Steve, do you mind my saying that may be the reason? why he gets this so wrong, because he is in fact, I would call it maybe obsessed with Europe, and that sometimes I think changes his perspective, because Europe is Europe, and I do think he's critical. He's been critical of France. He's certainly the most knowledgeable American reporter writing about
Yeah.
France and so forth. But at some point, that kind of influence has to have the European way of thinking about things has to steep in there somehow, is what I'm thinking.
Could be. I don't know. I was totally. I thought this
Yeah, it
can't
was
be the
too.
same Chris
I read it. It
Caldwell.
was,
You did? Yeah. I thought I couldn't. I was just staggered.
and then he
by
came
it.
out with another one a day or two later with another anti-war person. I forget.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
Spectator, in Spectator.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, the latest news I saw first thing here Saturday morning is that Iran fired long-range missiles at Diego Garcia, which is 2,500 miles away. We had doubted they had the capacity to shoot something that far. Apparently, it didn't hit. I'm not sure if they fell short or were just inaccurate, but that range puts most of European capitals in range of Iran right now. And okay, that's an interesting fact.
Well, they're
Yeah.
already changing their minds to some extent. After basically turning their backs on Trump, and Trump saying, "Sorry, we don't need you." All the business with oil and everything else is causing some of them, at least, to rethink their position and send some
Right.
help, shall we say?
Oh yeah, well, that's an interesting point. Is that they're much more dependent. Everybody's more dependent on the Gulf Straits of Hormuz being open than we are. Now, oil's traded on a global market, and so whatever the world price is going to be the price here. And so, but we're not going to have gas lines. We're not going to have shortages. Apparently, Australia is only 45 to 60 days away from running out of oil. It's just, and China and the others and the Europeans, they've got a big problem, and we don't. All right, I want to go back to something you said, Lucretia. Did I hear you say this right? That you think Trump could be better in his communications, or needs to be more direct or vigorous in his communications of why and how we're doing this? Is that what you said, or was that a student who said that?
I actually think I think that's probably true, because and it's really because the legacy media, of course, is going to report it exactly like John said, and Trump has been good on True Social. I mean, he's sort of outlining the war for us day by day, minute by minute, practically on True Social. And that has a reach, but I don't know that it reaches far enough. I don't know how, for instance, you would recreate the tie a yellow ribbon phenomena from the original Desert Storm, right? I don't know how you do that, but something like that really needs to be done, if that makes sense, in order to make this an American project that Americans can get behind. And I know that there's never been a war that there hasn't been opposition and we're losing and all those other things. But there's the political side of it too. He needs to do that or get out in time for people to recover and for the midterms, right?
Well, that could be right. Yeah, the gas price thing is going to be a problem. Can I throw an extra
one
question?
last thing?
Sorry, sure.
Can I just make one last comment, which is that my students believe that he does that if he doesn't fix gas prices and so on, he will lose, but that Trump doesn't care. I thought this was really interesting. Of course, this is anecdotal. This is not even data, but that Trump thinks he's doing the right thing regardless. Now, I know he said that, right? We had to do this if gas prices go up a little bit, but that message really needs to be pounded home, because the Democrats, of course, are pounding the opposite.
Yeah, so I'm in heated agreement with that. I mean, let's remember that Trump said that he was against stupid wars, not any war. And the next thing he always said was, we never win wars anymore. He wants to win this one. Now, we know he's got this protean capability to declare victory for anything he does, right? Because he always wins. But I think he has to really mean it. In other words, this has to be a real victory and not simply a rhetorical one, or even the supporters will be disappointed. And that's the exit question, John, is, of course, Trump has his usual inconsistencies and improvisations like saying the Japanese prime minister the other day, gosh, why did you tell us about Pearl Harbor?
Well, what Trump really meant to say was it was the Jews who were behind Pearl Harbor.
There you go. I mean,
They're
That
good at
was the
surprise
greatest.
attacks.
right.
They're
right.
good at
so
surprise
great.
attacks.
But by the way, some of the America First people in 1940 did think it was the Jews dragging us. Never mind.
Right.
But here's my observation. You both can chime in on this, but and then we'll go to a break. I have been, on the whole, very impressed with Trump. He's steady. He seems calm. He seems resolved. I think, by the way, Lucretia, the Truth Social post may be a better way of communicating than doing the Oval Office address, which people don't watch anymore, and he's not very good at, I don't think. But leave that aside. But the point is that this is Trump at his finest hour, I think, and he has risked everything on this, which is, another thing about him that is sort of remarkable. And so I'm pretty confident in the guy. I don't worry that he's going to wimp out or as Lucretia says, I don't think he's going to bend to the pressure on this. I think he's going to see it through. And what that means, I don't know. But I've been very impressed with the guy. What have you thought?
Well, one thing your comment and Lucretia's comments prompt me to think, which I had thought before coming on, was no matter what Trump does, he gets criticized for it. Right? So before it was he listens too much to the MAGA base was his. Now it's he doesn't listen enough to the MAGA base.
Yeah.
But if we want to define presidential leadership as doing the right thing, even at the cost of popularity, or when the people initially are against them and have to be persuaded of it, and we look at Lincoln in the early years of the Civil War as one of the great examples of this. Well, that's what Trump's doing. I think it is the right thing to remove Iran or the Iranian regime from power, and I think picking off all of China's troublemaking allies in the world makes a lot of strategic sense to us. And actually, our allies in the world should be happy with this. If they're all getting their oil through the Strait of Hormuz, we don't need it because we're energy independent. We're actually doing a service, again, for our allies and the rest of the world, not for ourselves. That seems to me like one of the very definitions of leadership. It'd be easy for Trump not to have waged this war. Right? He could have just coasted into the midterms with low gas prices and relatively stable foreign policy. And now the one downside people criticize him for, although I don't think this is what the MAGA base would criticize him for, he's a bit of a gambler, right? He's rolling the dice on this.
Yep. There's no certainties in these kinds of things. I just wanted to ask you if you thought that there was any kind of argument, any kind of attack that could be made against Trump that's sort of similar to the first Bush going in just for oil. And remember the comments. Too bad that Kuwait's number one export wasn't broccoli, and because this is a war for oil. That under the second Bush it was for this was for Cheney's friends at Halliburton, and those kinds of there's an ulterior motive that is as base and as pernicious as possible. There isn't one of those for Trump, right? There's really, I mean, all they can say is it's the Jews. That's about the best that they can do, right? Am I missing anything?
No, I was going to mention that was notice how the it's all about oil has completely disappeared. Yeah. It used to be it was all about the oil. Well, but now we have plenty of oil here, so you got to find something else.
Well, all those people who said, 15, 20 years ago that Sarah Palin was an idiot for saying drill, baby, drill, we couldn't drill our way out of oil dependence, they should keep a discreet silence about this and just shut up. So, and we're going to shut up about this topic now and go to a quick break and then come back for Lucretia's turn to set the table. Okay, it was 9 o'clock on the nose right now. We started at 8:30, so this isn't bad. So let's. You all ready with something? You want? I am. Thune. Okay.
I want to beat up, but I'll beat up because here's the several things. Thune on the. I think we should talk about TSA. I think we should talk about the SAVE Act. Those two things, and perhaps compare Thune to.
He's making Mitch McConnell look pretty good by comparison, isn't he?
I mean, Mitch got some things through, but anyway, okay.
All right, let's come back in 3, 2. All right, Lucretia, you're up. What's on your mind this week? Or should I say what's not on your mind this week? Because usually it's everything, but
everything. I want to channel MAGA's absolute, complete, and total frustration with John Thune. Now, I will remind you guys that I was against any one of the Johns from taking over for Mitch McConnell. I want not the John in present company. If John in present company was actually majority leader of the Senate, I would be thrilled to death. Even though he's a
It'd
little
be like the
shaky
return of
sometimes.
Lyndon Johnson.
Yes, but I mean, this guy's been worse than you could have imagined. He's accomplished essentially nothing other than, I guess you could say, the big beautiful bill. Tell me what else is really that he has used any kind of political capital to get something done. Compare him, and I know it's not the same to compare a majority leader in the Senate with a Speaker of the House, but compare him to Nancy Pelosi, who could get her caucus to do anything practically, even when she had really serious, when the squad was coming in and so on. Thune seems incapable of managing anything in the Senate. So right now, here we are. It's what's the date today? The 21st. How many days have we not had funding for organizations that have absolutely nothing to do with the Democrats' disingenuous and ridiculous demands about ICE, which, as we know, is funded for what, 3 years? And they can't make this argument. They can't come out and embarrass Democrats, and Democrats get up there and gaslight about the fact that it's all Republicans' fault. And then the SAVE Act is even worse. I mean, how does he not realize that? I really do believe that if Republicans can pass the SAVE Act, we will get back to a level playing field. If they don't, if we can continue to have the kind of manipulable, I'll say it like that, electoral practices across places like California that are, so completely one state, et cetera. If we can't do that, Republicans are done. And John Thune obviously knows that, and he doesn't care because he's too much of a swamp creature. I don't know. I don't know what his problem is. I'm so frustrated.
I'm going to mostly agree with you on this. I can't, but actually, I can't believe it.
What?
And well, first of all, I did hear. I'll leave it to you. I'll say two things quickly, John, and then you can try and do your worst to say the worst. I heard Thune on. I was in my car and listening to one of the Sunday chat shows on satellite radio, and Thune was on, and boy, was he weak. I mean, there was sort of no attack on the Democrats, or what it was is very mealy mouthed attacks on the Democrats. But that raises a bigger point, which is, I mean, I think there's an argument about what is the prudent course on the filibuster, the talk, all the rest of that. We can game that out for a long time on both sides. But I recall now, I forgot about this, but about back around maybe 2013, 2014, Thune was a rising star. There was talk he might be a presidential candidate at some point in the near future. And so some friends of mine, sort of heavy hitters in Southern California, hosted him for a small dinner at the California Club. We wanted to size him up. I think former Governor Wilson was there, and I was invited, and Thune gave a talk, and the verdict afterwards was unanimous. Boy, is he unimpressive. That guy's going nowhere near a presidential campaign. He's not got it. I mean, and this is before a friendly audience. You'd think he'd know at least some red meat or something. And I couldn't believe how unimpressive the guy was. I think the only reason people talked him up is he was tall and handsome, supposedly, I guess. I don't know. And a new face.
Well, I know that my gay friend believes that.
Okay. Well, all right. Wait, never mind. So I'm not surprised that he's kind of a weak leader, but so
before John goes, Steve,
yeah?
I just want to say that maybe the most annoying thing he said to me throughout all of this was, we can't do the talking filibuster. And maybe John can even explain that a little bit, because people seem somewhat confused, which would not be a change of any kind. First of all, he said the talking filibusters never worked. What a moron. Has he heard of the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Jesus, what a moron. But anyway, he says, if we have a talking filibuster, we won't get anything else done. Explain to me what they're getting done in the meantime. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And he's also kept the Senate from going into recess, so Trump can't make recess appointments. I can't think of one good thing about that guy, but I'll be quiet now and let John defend him, his namesake.
Well, actually, who did you want to be majority leader? Ted Cruz or other supporters of the institution? I mean, the problem
Mike
is not
Lee.
the yeah, the problem is not the it's Thune, it's the institution. I mean, the Senate exists and the way it does because any single senator can stop
Yeah.
it from operating, right? That's the way it works. It's very different from the House. They're two completely different animals. I mean, the speaker has enormous power in the
Yeah,
House and does not in
but
the
John,
Senate.
can I just jump in right there? Sorry to interrupt. The difference, I mean, Lucretia rightly brings up Nancy Pelosi, who had narrow majorities and still got stuff through. Why? Because her members feared her. Now, you're right that senators have more power individually than a House member has. But you know what? Lyndon Johnson was the most successful Senate Majority Leader because people feared him. Nobody fears John Thune in the Republican caucus. I think some of them did fear Mitch McConnell. And so
Yeah,
this is why I
And
think
money,
that, right?
but
money, if nothing
this
else.
idea that I mean, the only way you really get anything done in the way you guys want is to have 60 votes in the Senate, right? There's just no major legislation passed that has a sort of purity to it, other than right something like Obamacare when they had briefly 60 senators.
Right.
And I really think getting rid of the filibuster would be would really harm us more than progressives. The progressives, remember what they wanted to do and came within 2 votes of doing at the beginning of Biden's term. If it hadn't been for Lucretia's favorite senator from Arizona, right, the filibuster would have been gone.
Housebreaker.
And what happened? Well, they would pack the Supreme Court, add two liberal, right,
States, yeah.
two liberal Commonwealth, I don't know what they're, territories to the right, DC and Puerto Rico to the Senate, which would permanently change the structure of the Senate, I think, against us, and pass their own voting rights bill, HR 1, right, which would forbid voter ID, even by states that want to have it. Meanwhile, what would we do with it? We would have a rule to require voter ID, which the Democrats would change immediately when they got the Congress back, and they wouldn't have to have a filibuster because we got rid of it.
But
So
I'm
I
not
think
asking for that.
you're
Yeah.
saying
What I'm
I thought you
asking
just
for.
said we should get rid of the filibuster,
Oh, I
No,
never
no.
said
and
that.
that's one of
I
Thune's
said
problems.
Yeah.
I
No.
said that we should have that he should start a talking filibuster. In other words, a real filibuster as it was intended, which would mean that the Democrats would have to get up there and talk about all the reasons why they do not think voters should have voter ID, et cetera, et cetera. They would have to
Oh
until they
yeah,
and
but they
it would
would
be the
win.
best thing that happened.
But they would. There's no way we would overcome a talking filibuster. There's not enough votes. But yeah, you could say
Well,
make the
no, you
Democrats
don't have
get up
to.
and
They
talk,
just
and they can.
eventually they quit. Eventually they quit because they're
I doubt it.
embarrassing themselves. That's what would happen. You don't have to have the votes. You just have to. They don't keep talking. The talking's
Yeah.
over. You vote, and you have
I
51.
No, the way the talking filibuster works is right. So the Democrats will have the right to speak. There's no time limit on it, so they
Right?
will keep yielding the floor to each other.
Yeah, that's
There's
fine.
basically 45 of them, right? So
yeah.
it's easy to keep the talking
No,
filibuster
but
going.
what's that going to look like? The people are going to actually pay attention to what's happening in the Senate, and at some point, they're just
I
going to
don't.
look ridiculous. That's how it
That's
worked in 1964, where you
When
had
Well,
right.
also 1964, we had much more of the votes on our side because of and we also had the good thing about the 1964 filibuster is that the defenders were just these racist segregationists in the South, like Strom Thurmond.
exactly.
Whereas I think
Exactly.
the Democrats can just say, I don't think the federal government should have, right, voter ID. I think
John,
it's racist.
so
They can say
so
that over and over again for
And
hours and
people
hours.
don't, 80%
They
of
don't feel
America
any
doesn't
shame
believe it.
defending that.
it turns
But
out a
80% of
majority of
America doesn't believe it.
yeah, I mean, a majority of Democrats favor the main features of the SAVE Act, and I think I'm with Lucretia on this. I think they make them pay a cost for their obstruction, It might not succeed because, by the way, I do think that you want judges approved. You want to get funding for DHS and get secure TSA people back working again.
But those are all,
But
those are all things we want. See, the
Right.
problem with
Well,
the
but
talking filibuster
they're going to
is
want it
there's
too.
nothing that Democrats want to pass that's being held up by just talking about their our voting rights bill. All the harm that occurs politically for keeping the Senate basically shut down while they do this is to the Republicans, right? Like,
Well, yeah,
except
okay.
they haven't
that's why it's
passed
different.
anything.
Well, okay.
Well, there's going to be the the war funding bill. There's going to be a bill to reopen the TSA and parts of the DHS that aren't already closed, right?
Five times they've come up for a vote. 5 times it's been defeated by Democrats.
Yeah.
But
right. And
but
I mean,
it's things that the administration wants, right? The Democrats sit there, they don't get anything out of passing those bills, so they don't mind the harm from a filibuster.
Maybe that's what I think
Trump
you're
gets
missing.
blamed for it.
The political side of it, John, is the point. The fact that 80% of Americans believe we should have voter ID. And
I know,
they get
but
up there
nobody
and
cares.
no, but
I mean, look, the Democrats have been
care.
stopped. The Democrats,
No, listen.
they say on polls they care, but the Democrats have been stopping this kind of legislation for like 25 years.
But
do they really suffer
political-
any harm at the polls for being against voter ID? Really?
They might this time with the talking filibuster if they stand up there and talk about how it's racist and we should, because what it's really doing is going to keep married women from being able to vote, and they did make all those other stupid arguments. If they have to do that, John, that means that people are actually paying attention to what they're saying, and
you could say this about any bill. You could say this about any bill that you favor, that we ought to have a talking filibuster.
That's the point of the Senate. That's the point of the filibuster.
Because, by the way,
you believe that the American people will suddenly awaken themselves and politics will suddenly shift because of. Well,
the politics
I just don't think it makes
shift.
it doesn't make a big difference to
All
me.
right,
politics are on our side.
Yeah, let's get out with this observation about how insincere the Democrats are in their opposition. If they really believe that this bill would prevent married women from voting, they would be for it because married women vote overwhelmingly Republican. They're just making stuff up. That's the polite term for it, right?
Which is what would happen if they had to actually defend it on the floor of the Senate. People would realize how disingenuous and really ridiculous their arguments are. And at some point, it's going to have an effect on their electoral prospects, which is the only thing, of course, they care about.
The only example you have is the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which shows you how far out of proportion the real victory over this was versus the small potatoes of this bill. This is just not worth it. I mean, you want to pass something like monumental, like the 64 Act. But this is like, this is just not even remotely in the same universe as important.
I think it is. I think if we don't get the SAVE Act, we are destined to a one-party state.
That's a warped sense of politics.
Let's remember one little detail about the 64 filibuster. In those days, you had to have 67 votes to break a filibuster.
It was higher.
So, that's why it dragged on so long, is because it allowed an even smaller minority of the minority to block it. Whereas they changed it to 60 votes, I think, in 1976. Coincidentally, when Democrats were starting to roll up big majorities in Congress, but were still divided enough about things that they couldn't get some of the things they wanted through.
They still had Southern Democrats.
That's right. Well, you had liberal Republicans too, so it was still a scrambled mess. But the point is, I think it's easier now to impose a political cost and control the debate. I just think it's wimpy to not try it.
Yeah, I do too. And let me just remind you.
Purely symbolic and performative politics, because there's no chance it would actually pass.
I don't agree with that. I absolutely don't agree.
I think.
Let me just remind you what George Washington said about the Senate. I think it was George Washington. Why do you have a Senate? And he says, why do you pour coffee into the cup?
Oh,
from the cup into the saucer. Why to cool? Right. I can't imagine doing that because I don't like my coffee cold. But the point is that the Senate is actually supposed to debate these things, genuinely debate them, and that's why you have had the filibuster begin. It's only a rule. It's not in the Constitution, in case anybody's confused about that. I get it. But The whole point was to reflect the deliberative sense of the Senate so that you could actually discuss these things. And if you had a minority opinion that was important enough and they could defend it for 30 days or whatever they did talking about it, then great. But if not, if you've got a majority opinion in the country, 80% is unbelievable in terms of an absolute, that's unanimity in a country like ours. If you can't, if the Democrats can truly get up there and make the case for why they shouldn't have this, okay then, but force them to do it when the rest of the country is against it. And that's why they don't want any part of it.
Okay,
Look,
so
there's a big difference between your hopes about how the Senate would work and how it actually works.
All right.
And the fact is, there has not been an override of a filibuster since 1964. And you really think that this voting rights bill is as important as the 1964 Civil Rights Act? That is an example of how exaggerated people's sense of winning and losing is today over minor things versus the important things of things like the Voting Rights Act of the Civil Rights Act is 64, the Voting Rights Act 64. This is pales in comparison.
All right.
How important those are. But my point is, there are so many other pieces of legislation since 1964 and 65 that didn't overcome a filibuster, which are also more important than this. And you have to compromise in the Senate to get those through. The Senate is not the greatest deliberative body anymore. I think maybe never was.
I think that thesis there, John, might not be historically accurate, but have to go back and check and parse them all out. But instead,
my main point is there hasn't been an override of a filibuster since 1964. I mean, you would know.
That doesn't mean it hasn't been used effectively, but that's a new topic. I want to look into this some. For now, I am going to appeal to the 3 Whiskey Happy Hour parliamentarian who will rule that by a 2-1 vote, we are going to overcome, Lucretia and I are going to overcome your filibuster on this topic, John, and we're going to go to a quick break, and then we'll go to our wrap-up.
I don't filibuster. I am short and concise. You guys, you Straussians, filibuster endlessly.
Okay. Okay. You got some bees ready, Linda?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
My closing with John
there's not one more topic?
No, I'm gonna because we're up to let's see, where are we? We're at we're almost 9:17. We're almost 50 minutes in, 48 minutes in. So I'm bored of that stuff. And besides, it's not that long a closing, but it'll be fun. And so let's just do that. All right, ready? Coming back in 3, 2. I'm going to set you up a little bit, Linda. I'm going to mention Chuck Norris passing as the most important story of the week. So if you want to get that one handy. So in 3, 2. Well, all right. A lot of passings this week. The passing of Paul Ehrlich, the passing of more and more Iranian leaders, the passing of Cesar Chavez's reputation. But I think the most important passing of the week has to be Chuck Norris. And I'll bet our friends at the Babylon Bee and elsewhere, because Chuck Norris has generated some of the greatest memes for the last, 20 years? Anyway.
Yeah,
I just want to point out that Steve debated Paul Ehrlich and Steve killed him.
Twice, but anyway.
And
okay. I'll come back to Chuck Norris in a moment, but this one's for John. John Thune vows to bring SAVE Act up for vote as soon as he's sure it won't pass.
Right.
Sorry. Iran update. Current tax dollars winning battle against tax dollars from 3 years ago. That's not
I don't
funny.
get
that. Pallets of cash.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dogs are out here with me, which I
didn't
normally
hear
would be. You can't hear them? Okay,
No.
good. Well, I would just say I'd normally be embarrassed about it, but since, I'll just leave it at that. Man bravely, it's a picture of Joe Kent. Man bravely resigns from Trump administration at great cost of doing podcast tour, getting book deal. Okay, how about this one? Kevin the janitor, now most senior military official, left in Iran.
That's about right.
I like that. Democrats fear higher gas prices could affect Molotov cocktail production. Do you get it?
Oh, yes.
Okay, a few Californias really quick.
Yeah.
California celebrates installation of single LA trash can that cost $400 billion and took 18 years to build.
Yeah, that's not that much of an exaggeration. Yeah.
No, it's not. Newsom allocates 900 million for black bear porta potties. Okay, back to the Chuck Norris one. Fear not, says Chuck Norris to calm trembling angels. And then this one is actually not Babylon Bee. It was a meme posted on X, and it's a picture of Chuck Norris in his gi, and it says, "Oh, come on, God, wrong Chuck."
Right. No, there's been a ton of great ones already. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Right.
But that's my favorite for today.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I have one last one, if you'll forgive me. Confirmed in his final days, Charlie Kirk came to agree with whatever you believe.
Oh, yeah, that is an ugly story. Yeah,
Yes,
annoying.
Yeah, we've never talked about all that craziness with what's her name, Candace Owen and Charlie Kirk's wife and all that.
Yeah, I prefer
We
not
did
to give
a little
that.
bit.
Yeah, I prefer not to give that any more oxygen than it already has. But yeah.
Okay, I'm finished, Steve.
Yep.
Many more, but I'm finished.
John?
Well, always drink your whiskey neat, buy more books. And Steve, I'm told you have a new AI enhanced ending for the show.
Well, for today anyway, a custom ending. I'm still working on new stuff because I want to work in the proper acknowledgments of our new sponsor, the Civitas Institute. But I was listening to you, John, yesterday on Law Talk, extending yourself on the definition of imminent. Because, Lucretia roughed you up on imminent a couple times, and generally people said there wasn't an imminent threat from Iran. And I got to thinking, I wonder if we can mess with John's head by asking him to think about not imminent, but immanent, right? It's so imminent, I-M-M-I-N-T. Immanent is a whole different.
Eschaton.
Exactly. Lucretia knows where I'm going.
You Straussians are so crazy. Not only now do you care about the single word in a sentence, but the single letter in a word. What's with you people?
Well,
Come on.
I asked Grok to give us a John Yu memo about immanentizing. Immanent versus imminent. And I got a lot of stuff, but I'm going to give you just two quick paragraphs from it because I think they're fun. So, introduction, and some listeners will know the reference here, and others, it won't matter. Introduction. The eschaton, the final, perfected state of burger being, has long been deferred to some future heavenly happy meal. Gnostic heretics, vegans, and the Ninth Circuit have insisted that such perfection cannot be forced into the temporal realm without grave constitutional peril. Yet recent events, such as the limited time introduction of the Big Arch, present an opportunity to reconsider. The question is not whether the end can be immanentized, but whether the president possesses plenary Article 2 authority to do so through unilateral executive mastication.
Finally, something I can understand in what you just said.
Okay, well, there's more. Not much more. I conclude he does. And so part A is inherent executive ingestion power. This isn't very long. The framers, living in an age before frame broiling, could not foresee the Big Arch. Yet they endowed the president with those powers necessary and proper to the office. See McCulloch versus Maryland, but substitute Maryland with extra value sizing. The take care clause, read in light of the commander-in-chief power, authorizes the president to consume and thereby sanctify objects of national gastronomic significance without congressional interference. To hold otherwise would convert the Oval Office into a mere suggestion box for calorie counters. There you go, John. I think that's a pretty good parody of you.
Now, you guys, I don't exactly know the reference, but you guys are into this phrase immanentize, the eschaton. What the hell does that mean again?
It's
That's what this all take off on.
Perfection here now.
Yeah, it's essentially communism, but it's, I'll just add for, I don't know if you know this, Lucretia, but it's very weird stuff. Mark Blitz at Claremont, who's written some really good books about Heidegger, who's just impossible, right? So Mark Blitz gets Heidegger, but he told me not long ago that Mark Blitz did that he took a semester course with Vogelin and didn't understand a single word the guy said.
And you can read Heidegger?
I know. That's
oh
what
my
I thought
gosh.
too. I know. That's saying something, right?
I guess it must be a little bit like people who can read Burke. And
that's right. But I'll add that there was once a debate at the Philadelphia Society back in the 70s, and it was a resolution. And the resolution was resolved, this House will not immanentize the eschaton. And one of the debaters on the negative was Judge Danny Boggs, who we're going to have dinner with. next month. So,
okay.
and maybe he'll regale us with tales of that. Because one of the other debaters was Mike Ullman. That's funny
So
stuff.
yes, John, the simplest way to understand it is bring perfection here now.
Yeah.
Make it happen now. Make
But you mean it as
utopia
you mean it
here.
as a joke. You don't. You mean you guys say it as an
I don't believe
insult,
it.
right?
Well, kind of.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just.
It's a way to. All right, we're gonna imminentize the eschaton of this show and draw to a close. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back next week, probably live next week. We're gonna try and do, I think, a Friday afternoon, evening next week, but we'll see. Stay tuned. Bye, everybody.
Bye.